Excellent. Here we are.
Yay.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started. So,
It's funny
good
that
af-
both our pictures on the slide, we don't have our glasses on, but now we both do.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Um, Good afternoon, everyone. We're here to present to you the big idea. This is how Bob and myself have come up with connecting business systems analysis and testing and automating that process. So we're here to present this to you. I am Melissa Daly, and I will let Bob introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Bob Johnston. Thanks for joining us today. Yeah, we're really excited to talk about how our two companies, Orca Intelligence and Critical Logic, can work together to create a really innovative solution to help you modernize your software development and your software testing. So welcome again.
Yes. And again, my name is Melissa Daly. I am the owner and founder of Orca Intelligence. So we're looking forward to sharing a lot of information with you today. Of course, we've already done our introductions. And then Bob and I are going to have a discussion about software systems analysis and automating the testing process with that. And then how we've integrated our solutions together to provide you these benefits.
Right. Yeah.
So in our discussion today, Bob, what are we thinking? From the analysis and design approach, I do believe that it's really important for software, when we're starting a software project, to have a framework in place that allows you to plan your analysis and design process. Because without that framework, you can't really automate. What are you
Right.
thinking?
Yeah, frameworks are really important. Framework kind of gives you a process and a roadmap on, how to apply technology, how to apply your resources in a way that's repeatable and, measurable. So that's really important to have that framework.
Yeah. And then even within that framework, I know for us, when we're trying to define requirements and analyze them through our discovery phases, we always get into a point where if that framework is not well defined, then it makes it hard for the developers in order to develop. It makes it hard for the testers to test, or it just makes it more difficult to go through the entire process without having a well-planned beginning. It hinders the structure of defining the features, epics, or user stories, or however you want to define your different requirements. For us, we always have epics, features, user stories, and then we also have business rules and so on and so forth, data elements and all that, architectural documents and all that goes along with it. And so without that structure of what you're going to have to define to make a part of your test cases and test plans or training or whatever else later on, it makes it really difficult to maintain that information and then move at this almost at the speed of light if you want to when you're going through a software project. How about
Yeah,
what's your
yeah, that
experience?
that's great. I think when you have structured and well laid out requirements and stories, as you mentioned, it makes it a lot easier to validate the requirements. Just validating the requirements is something that really isn't well identified in most processes, but it's really critical. If your requirements are not very well defined, or if they have ambiguity in them and so on, you don't find that out till somewhere in the development phase or even after that you have problems with the requirements. So the same thing happens in test. If the requirements aren't valid or clear or understandable or all agreed to, it makes testing very difficult. So validating those requirements is an important step here. And we'll talk more about that as we look at the demo and the technology. But the ability to look at the requirements as well structured as they come out of Swiftly and say, yeah, they make sense. Those are valid. They have the rules and so on are understandable and clear. That's a key part of testing here. So we're going to be talking about how to integrate the validation of the requirements and the creation of the requirements to end up with better testing and ultimately a lot better software through development and test.
Mhm. So what I'm hearing too is that based off of based off of having a structure in place, there is flexibility in reuse and recreation, right? So let's say if you
Absolutely.
start on one project, you can now reuse this information on other projects. You don't have to redevelop the whole wheel, even in automation, because sometimes if you're on one project and you built out a whole automation process related to a specific software system that was implemented, you could most times, if it's structured for a software system that's similar, you can take that same automated process and use it on another system.
Absolutely. I mean, having reusable components, that's a key concept in software development. But here also, having reusable templates and components and structure, not only in all the requirements and analysis and design, but in the testing, certainly in the automation, building a framework that can be reused in lots of different projects, and commonality and function and all that's really important here. And we're going to show you how we can help establish those frameworks and create repeatable solutions across multiple projects.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is how we plan, develop, and deploy in a strong way. So now we have, what if we were able to automate the entire process? We talked about having this, infrastructure in place and this framework. So that's really the foundation of automation. And so now if we have the structure in place, now can we automate? So what do you think? Can we do it, Bob?
Yeah, I think we ought to automate. What's interesting here is that what we're moving from to this automation, that's really what we're trying to solve, because we're really moving from a process that's human-based and has been this way since the beginning of software development. It really hasn't changed much, how you develop tests and requirements. And we think it's really time to bring automation and modern technology to that part of the process to design and test your software. Yep.
Right. So now both of our both of our products together, IQM Studio and Swiftly, will allow us to do that from the analysis and design all the way through your automated testing process as well. And so we're going to demonstrate to you all how we were able to do that using both of our systems.
Right.
All right. So I'm going to get ready to demo. Let me pull up my screen here. Make sure I'm in the right spot. All right. So I'm going to go through the grants management process here, where Bob and his team has already entered in some epics, users, features, and user stories. And of course, all this was automated. So we have 15 features for each of the various epics, which roughly have about 2 to 4 different user stories within each. So here, we're going to enter in another epic. And let's see, what can we do for grants? So we have grants, we have grantors, grantees, participants. Let's do reviews. We'll say manage reviews. I know we're using the manage verb a lot, but hey, it's mostly what you do with the system. So here, once we enter in all that information, then we select Swiftly Epic. So we're going to add a Swiftly Epic. We're going to auto-generate this and say yes. And then what's going to happen is that it's going to create the Manage Reviews Epic. So now it's going to create the review and go through all the different high-level steps that we've predicted here.
So this is all happening by Swiftly templates, right? Once you enter, you say, I want a new epic, it knows to create from templates the different basic functionality like create, review, edit, and so on, right? So it's actually generating these user stories, or these are scenarios, I guess, for
Exactly.
the epics, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's going through our algorithms that are generating the templates, because then we can add additional, once this is done, it doesn't just stop here. We can add additional items here. Like you'll see down here, you'll see associate participant. We can also add, I think we already have search here. Do we have search? If not, I'll add search. Yeah, so let's add search to one of these. So like if we want to search a grantee, we can say, we can swap a grantee. If you want to search a grantee, you can type in search and then it will go through the algorithm for any things that's associated with search. and then add it here. So you'll see search grantee and all of that information. So this is still processing most of our basic templates that we have. Oh, we already have search up here. It's processing most of our basic templates that we have through our algorithm. And so now what I want to do is show you all what that actually looks like. So let's look at the original search again. So here we have search. I just selected that feature, search grantee, and this creates 4 different user stories. So let's say we'll select search grantee. This is going to be pretty basic because it's the search grantee records. So here, this is our in-platform tutorial. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip that. But you'll see that it starts out with a small sentence about, as a user, I want to be able to search for grantee records so that I can view specific information. Pretty simple. So now you have your acceptance criteria, and this is 3 steps. The user selects the option to search for grantee information. The user enters the search criteria. The system displays the search results. And then we also do your jerkin code as well. So given this, the user selects the option to search for grantee information. The user enters the search criteria selected, and then the system displays the grantee results. We also create a couple of diagrams associated with it. We also create data elements as well, so you see username and so forth. We also create users. That's pretty helpful. So we kind of predict some of the users that are going to be interacting with the system. So administrator, grantor, grantee, participant, and probably reviewer as well. And then we also predict some of the elements. If we go to additional details, there we go. If we go to additional details, so there's a lot of additional details that have been created, but we'll see the validation messages. So invalid username entered, what details should be displayed. So this creates all of your invalidated data messages. And then we also relate to other user stories as well. So the other user stories that were created in relationship to this particular user story are listed under here as a relationship to this user story. I'll just show this relationship. So this is all the relationships here. So audit the search grantee records, filter grantee search records, and sort. So all of these are automatically generated as well, in addition to this particular user story. And then now I'm going to cancel out of this and go back to the dashboard. And again, from here, you'll see the in tool tutorials. Now what I can do is I can export this information. You'll see a summary of all of the user stories that were created and the features and epics they're associated with. And so you'll see that we created 2,659 user stories over the time that we started with this product. So I'm going to download this information. And now we'll have it where so now we have it where we have information that was submitted, and we have all 2,659 records that were created. And so from this list, now this can be imported to any system, basically. So we can now import this information into IQM Studio so that they'll be able to maneuver and create your automated tests from there. So I just want to kind of show what is listed here from our system from Swiftly. So you'll see the steps from the acceptance criteria, the jerkin code, any of the features and the epics. And then you'll see that we'll add the user roles and the data elements to associate and any detailed requirements later. We have those as well.
Right. So so Melissa, let me make sure I'm understanding all this, is that you just developed all that from algorithm, from templates based on some of the initial choices you said about, you described the epic, you chose the category and the kind of basic functionality of the epic. And then for each epic, it generated all these features. So
Exactly.
you can then modify that, right? I mean, these are idealized list of features for that particular function, but you can
Correct.
certainly go back and say, well, our application works different, or it doesn't do that, or we call that user role, we actually call something else, or we don't have that user role. So you can modify this from the generated stuff to match exactly what you have in mind. Or the real advantage is it's going to fill in for you all the basic functionality you need for a search. So you don't have to go think up and analyze and say, oh yeah, we need all this stuff. This is like an idealized list of the features that you need to do that basic function, at least in a template format, right? So
Exactly.
am I understanding that right?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways. You can always go through the Excel spreadsheet and do that directly, or before, I kind of went through that we have this planning phase. So before you start to go through, you can plan and develop everything here. And then you
Yeah,
go to analyze. And from that analyze phase, you can say, you know what? I don't need to archive any of my application users. So I'm going to check that. I don't ever want to delete them. So I'm going to check that. For preferences, I don't want any search application preferences. We already know preferences is a little expensive to develop. So I may not want any preferences. So I just want to check all the ones that don't apply. And then you'll be able to select, you'll be able to select remove. And so it's going to remove those from the list. And then
right.
you'll be able to either generate again using the Excel template from the export. So if I go back here, so removed one of them, I think already. So then if I go back to board, all I would have to do is go back here, go to export, and then regenerate everything. So
Right.
now you'll see instead of 2,659, we now have 2,656,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because I deleted those other ones.
Yeah.
And so I can download this again and then go from there.
Yeah. Okay, so that's really cool. So that's when we see this, we get real excited because here, I'll go ahead and anything else you want to add, I'll take over and jump into how we use that information to develop testing. So
Yes,
ready to do
all
that?
yours.
Okay. Okay, so let me share here, jump in this way, share my screen. Okay. Actually, so I'm jumping right into the middle of this, but let me, so this, what you're seeing here is what we call a model or a cause effect model, a diagram of a particular feature that came out of Swiftly. So this particular one is create a grant, which is the epic that we focused on for this demo. And so create a grant, let me just show you that what we did was import this information here for Create a Grant. So Create a Grant has these four features in it. Create a grant, audit a grant, create an invalid grant, and create the grant and cancel it to make sure that I can cancel out of the creation. So those features and are all part of this epic of creating a grant. So we're able to take this information that came out of Swiftly that's in document format here, and then we can actually create a picture of that very thing. So what you see here is a drawing really of exactly the flow through that set of features. So here we're saying, and let me just orient a little bit, this thing I'm clicking on here is called a node, and over on the right, this is a description or details of what that node is doing. So here, when I see that picture on the model, the user navigates to the grant management screen or system. So that means I have to get to the computer, start a browser or whatever, start the application and get to the initial screen of the application. That's what this activity or this node is doing. And then there's a function here which says create a grant, which means I am going to select an option on that initial screen to create a new grant. Okay. If I do both those things, in other words, I start the application and I click on create a grant, the system should display the create information, right? So the system here I'm describing step by step, broken down into these nodes, how to flow through this epic and the different features within that epic. So as we move a little forward, we enter grant information. Okay, so what does that mean? There's a lot of details behind that, but this is meaning that the users actually entered the information required to create a grant, and then they can click down here. We'll see they say click save or click cancel. Okay, so if they get to here, enter the grant, and press save, they're going to get down here where the system is going to validate, okay, validate the information entered. Is it valid? Yeah. Then we're going to say the system should have saved it. And once it's saved, we can go audit it, okay? If the system says that information is invalid, then we're going to get a message that says the system information is invalid. In the same way, this top form, if I enter grant information and I click confirm, then if I don't, or I click cancel, then I should get a message that says grant creation is canceled. So all the epics, the whole epic, all four of the features are described all within this single model. And again, let me bring that up. You'll see here, everything in this particular screen I'm showing here is all four of those features or the rules for them are included in this diagram, okay? So there's a lot more to it. I kind of went quickly there to understand this diagram, and there's some other things you see here, like this particular notation says, well, you can't press cancel and save. You have to pick one of those two things. And here, same thing, is the system is either going to say the data is valid or invalid. So only one of those things can happen. So that's how this thing encompasses several different features in one diagram. Okay. Now, here's where the magic comes in. Once I have created this diagram, I can then do what we call generate. Okay. So when I generate, it analyzes all the different paths through that particular drawing, which means all the different rules and all four of the features have been analyzed. And it comes out and says, you can test all of those different combinations in 3 different tests. So there's 16 different ways to get through here, 16 different combinations of doing things and not doing things, and valid and invalid. And that creates 3 test cases. So I can show you those here. This is one view of the test cases. It's kind of a compact matrix view, but it's showing me there's 1 test, 2 tests, and 3 tests. Okay, that's how these are shown here. So if I just isolate test 1, you'll see I can read down this left side, navigate, create a grant, system displays the info, enter the grant info, okay, then do not press cancel, press confirm, and save it, and so on. So this tells you that's test 1, this is test 2, this is test 3, and we're guaranteeing you here that every single rule in this diagram is tested at least one time. That's what these check marks are showing me, is I can look at every single condition on these nodes and say, yeah, every one of them has at least one checkbox. So
Yeah,
this
and
is
this
a
is
compact view. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't. So that was important because that shows you the automatic traceability. So just right there, in
Yes.
less than 30 minutes, we've done requirements, we've done our test cases, and we've done traceability between the two.
Right, right. And we've generated these test cases to test all of those possible rules.
Mm-hmm.
So let me show you a slightly different view. This is a more traditional view of those same test cases. This is something you could hand to a tester and say, run these tests, right? And again, you're going to see each test has step-by-step, the steps to be taken and the expected results for each set of conditions. And if you run all 3 of these tests, you will have tested all of the rules that are in that diagram for that particular epic, okay? So that's one view. Another view of that is, as we showed a little bit before, we have BDD scenario format where given these things, when this happens, then this should happen. This is a much more familiar format to people who use Gherkin format and this particular style of test description. So we have that as an alternative. There's also lots of other formats of this. But a really important part, Melissa just alluded to, is a requirement traceability matrix as well. So when I run this, I can actually develop a list of, in a spreadsheet format, of all of the requirements that I need to test. Okay, get that up here. So this is an excerpt really from what Melissa was showing before, what should they export from Swiftly. This is all the requirements, the description, and what we've added is which test case apply to which one of these requirements. Okay, so here we say the cancel grant is one of the features that we're testing, and here we're going to say the cancel grant is tested in test case number 1. Okay, the create a grant is tested in test case number 2. Okay, and so on down here, we can see that audit a created grant is tested in test case number 2. So in this way, we can go down this requirement ID list and find things that are tested and know exactly which test that requirement. And we can notably find any requirement that are not tested. In our demo here, I'm only testing 2 of the epics in all of the Swiftly database, but this is showing you where we are testing and where we're not testing into the particular Swiftly project we're working on. So this is really important because it tells you if I have a problem or a bug in create invalid grant, these are the test cases I need to run in order to retest that if there's a fix or so on. Okay, so that's another really powerful feature here. Going back to the model here for a second, we can also see that again, there's other reports we can export out to different formats that you may find useful. One of the other things that's really important there, let me go in and look at this inner grant information in a little more detail. So I'm actually going to edit the details of this particular node. Okay, so in each one of the nodes in the diagram, we can describe any way we need to what should happen in that node. Okay, we also, as we just talked about, I can connect this particular thing that's happening to any of the features or the requirements that we're getting from Swiftly. So I can say this particular node is linked to this particular requirement. This one does not particularly link to any particular requirement, so I'm not going to do that. But the thing I want to show you here is we can also then tell IQM Studio here how to automate this step in the test, right? So here, let me go back to something a little simpler for a second. If I go back to navigate, for instance, for me to automate the test to navigate, what's going to happen is I need to start the application. And this is a browser-based app. So in this case, let me just show you the details here. I can tell my system, whenever this navigate shows up in the test, then I want you to start a browser, navigate to this URL, and I want you to use Firefox as the browser. Okay, that information right there is enough for our system and our framework to actually generate automated code to run this test. So me as a designer, all I have to do is say start a browser with this thing at Firefox, and I'm done. I've created the automation. So let me show you how, jump way ahead and show you how that looks in the test side. So I'm going to navigate over here to what we call our automate function. Okay. And I'm going to show here, this is the view we have to automate. I mean, it's a little hard to see, a little small for you, but let me, so here I have a folder with this create a grant. Again, it's probably a little small. Can you even see that, Melissa? Maybe barely.
Yeah, make it a little bigger, but it's fine.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can make this bigger. I should have changed my screen resolution, but
no, you're fine.
Okay. Well, let me just say what we're looking at here is a set of steps that represent the same steps that the model generated, but here we're looking at it in what we call keyword view, which says that we know for each one of those nodes included in this test which keywords or what actions, what automation we need to do. So actually, this is one view of it, so I can edit it and document it here. But let me just click this button here called executable. And what I'm about to do here in 1 second is generate an automation program. This particular code here is written for one of the products we interface with called Rapise from Inflectra. But this actually is JavaScript code that we generated that will, if you run this JavaScript code with Rapise, it will actually automate that test case for you, all the steps within it that came from the model. So I didn't write any code. I didn't do anything. I built the model. I told the model step by step how I want to automate it. And then I generated the automated script just like that. Okay. So that's a really powerful part of the end-to-end here. Let me go back to the model side for 1 second. I want to just make one other point. This model here represents the current state of this particular epic and the 4 features included in it. But let's say I want to change that, right? If I wanted to add a new message, or I wanted to create a new condition, or there's an extra step that needs to be added to this, literally, if I would go in here and add one more node like this and do this and say, hey, this is a, this is a new condition. Type. Okay. When I say there's a new condition and this invalid message happens anytime the new condition happens, I have right there immediately, I can then regenerate at the click of a button, new tests, and also regenerate new automation in 1 second. So the ability to maintain and change and modify these stories is extremely powerful. The amount of time you save from maintaining test cases based on changes happening in your requirements, it basically collapses any time you would take to do that maintenance. So that's a real important benefit of being able to automate these steps all the way from generating the epics and the features and all the elements that Swiftly does. We can then import that information directly in here and create a model based on the information we get from Swiftly. We can then attach this model to the Swiftly epic so we can keep track of those 2 things and connect them together. Once we build these models, we can generate the tests, and with a little extra work, we can also generate the automation that is runnable in your favorite automation tool. I should mention here, we're showing generating into Rapise, but we can also generate into almost any automation tool like Selenium or Ranorex or UFT or lots of other tools that you may be using. So Melissa, I think I'll stop there and catch a breath and see if there's anything you want to add to what I was saying.
Yeah, so I think also what I do want to add is that, the way that this is automated and the way that we've connected all of this together, the importance of this is that it makes it clean. It makes it so that there's clarity in the requirements. Again, going back to our framework, right? We have a framework so that we understand how to clarify requirements and make it in a natural language so that you're very specific. We're very specific in the language that we're using so that this can be automated and repeatable throughout, right? And consistent.
Right.
And then to be able to be used with other tools like Rapise. So I think it's very beneficial to note that, and then to note all the permutations that IQM Studio allows us here, and then to be able to add other permutations after that as well. So the new condition that you showed, it's very important for us to realize that this is scalable and flexible enough for us to move forward with, not only for one project, for multiple projects, like in the reuse that we started with before.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So everything you see here is stored in a database that can be, copied and moved and repeated and moved into additional projects and so on. So, yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then just in 30 minutes or so, we've done all of this work.
Right. So a special note here is that this is not technical, right? I mean, what you saw Melissa do working through the prompts in Swiftly, it's pretty self-guided. If you're a developer, somebody who's developing requirements, it basically is choosing from drop-down lists how you want to structure and which templates you want to use and the parameters and filters you want to put on. That's easy to learn. It's very intuitive. Same thing here. There's really no technical things you need to learn. You really everything you see here is in the terminology of your system, of your application. You all of this stuff is entered by you. Understanding how these things are linked together is pretty easy to learn. Once you do the whole interface, I showed you everything. We're clicking drop downs. We're pointing and clicking at things we know about. It's all based on what we talked about originally, is setting up a framework for you to do this work. So there's, it makes sense to you when you're looking at the choices and actually developing this material.
Excellent. Yep.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
Melissa, I think we can kind of say that's the demo, and maybe we can I think we may have some questions coming in from the audience. So maybe we can just end our demo here and switch into question and discussion mode.
Excellent. I agree.
Cool.
Oh, we have a couple questions. Can you use the products independent of each other? Yes, you can use the products independent of each other. That is, yes, you can do that. I see that one question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question, do you have training and services to implement the approach? Definitely. I think we both do. We definitely have that.
Yep.
So just definitely contact us for any of these questions if you have more details. What integration do you have with the test management tools? Is that for Spira, or I'm sorry, is that for Swiftly? I almost forgot the
Well, yeah, Melissa, you mentioned, well, I know that Swiftly has interfaces to Spira Test, but you also mentioned interfaces to Jira. You also interface with us. Yeah, we also interface with Spira Test and Spira Plan and Rapise, but we also interface with like Azure DevOps, the Microsoft tool. We also interface with almost any other automation tool like RandoX or Selenium or lots of other tools as well. And we have generic outputs that can interface with most other test management systems as well. We're showing our most mature and most integrated is though with the Spira Plan suite, Spira Test, Spira Plan, and Rapise. We have very strong interfaces from both our products to those two, to the Spira Test and Flector tools. Yeah.
And yes, we also integrate with Azure DevOps as well. You can do the same export and import it into Azure DevOps.
Right.
So we have the option to do, because I know with Azure DevOps, like the export is a little tricky, but we have the option within Swiftly where you can do the hierarchy export as well. So.
Yep. So, yeah, so we're almost out of time, but are there any more questions?
Melissa, if you have an already established application, how do you build that framework around? Because I saw you were asking a question around grants. It looked like, well, I just got a new project and I have to develop something for this new project. But what if you have an ongoing project that's been built out?
Great question. So
Yeah,
there's
really
two
great
things.
question.
Yeah, there's two things. So I can tell you we've used it primarily for projects that have been created already, because sometimes the documentation isn't there. So we will go through the same process that I've showed you. But we are in the development of building out where we can take your data dictionary and put your data dictionary into our system and just go through the same process of creating those requirements just by using your data dictionary. And so right now we're still in the process of building that out, but the framework is there where even if you just want to send us over an Excel spreadsheet of all that information, we can easily generate all of that for you. And at least you'll have the documentation and you'll be able to have it in a decomposed way in terms of the way a developer will develop. Like that's how we structure it. And then you can then continue to build on from there. So either way works, the way that I did it in the demo, or by taking your data dictionary soon when we have that implemented and just plopping it into our system. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and Karen, I'll just offer, you didn't really ask about Studio, but very similar. Much of our implementation and customers is in existing systems. So what we will often do is the modeling we apply is usually for newer features or supercritical features that really need to be well tested. One of the benefits of using the studio is that you get super high coverage of your testing. So if you have even an existing system, you may want to model some critical functionality. So we get really high coverage test cases for that particular set of functions. But yeah, it's the kind of thing you can always start in the middle and just pick targets. You don't have to model broadly, and it doesn't have to be something that was coming out of Swiftly. Obviously, any kind of requirement, even reverse engineering, we often do that. We'll reverse engineer and build a model out of behavior we see in real time, and then build the model and then be able to test against that behavior. So yeah, the real world, you very often, or not very often, do you find a greenfield development. So yeah, we have to be able to work in existing applications for sure.
Yeah, thank you both, and thank you, Mr. Johnson, because that's where I was going next with that.
Okay.
Actually, I am starting to use Rapise, so I was very interested in
Ah,
building those objects and then creating those scripts that Rapise can use, like the JavaScripts.
yes.
So yeah, I need to dig in a little bit more on that. I don't need to do
Yeah.
that. I'm gonna do that offline. But
Yeah,
thank you for
anytime
that.
you can contact us. Yeah, we didn't focus much on the automation side here. We just tried to get an overview, but absolutely, we have a really tight integration with Rapise.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else? We had a couple of good questions. Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, to kind of wrap everything up, we're trying to modernize. We call this the big idea, right? When we look at agile or any kind of development technology or process, that there's automation all over the place, running tests, DevOps. There's automation in data management and certain kinds of testing. There's automation and so on. But what we're really focused on is parts that aren't automated. And the parts that aren't automated is using the technology that Swiftly has to help automate developing a framework and structure of requirements that's useful in an agile environment, right? So that idea that we can actually generate epics and features and user stories and data elements from basically an interview template is just really, we think, pretty revolutionary. The other thing about that is that how can we then generate tests and automation from those requirements, right? I mean, that's also right now universally done by business analysts and QA analysts who sit down and laboriously write test cases in various formats with human frailties, and they do a pretty good job, but we think we can do a much better, faster job by automating all that process. So here, when we first got together swiftly and when Orca Intelligence and Critical Logic first met each other, we instantly saw this ability to mash these tools together to create this automation arc that just doesn't exist anywhere else in the industry. So we're pretty excited about this big idea, and I'm glad to have you guys on board to at least hear what we're saying. So
Yeah.
I'm going to say thanks for coming.
Yes. And same, I do what Bob has shared, his same sentiments. I think that we have a really good tool, and our combinations of both of those tools will really get you from an end-to-end solution. So thank you all for joining us.
Yep. Thanks.